You raise them, you love them, you trust them with your heart. Sometimes it turns out, even with your passwords. My granddaughter Emily, my sweet, smart Emily. She was the light of my life after my husband George passed away suddenly last year. The world felt tilted on its axis without him, especially the confusing, humming, blinking world of computers and online everything that he had always handled so effortlessly. Emily, bless her 19-year-old heart, stepped right in. She helped me navigate it all, paid my bills online, managed my bank accounts when the statements looked like a foreign language to me. I honestly thought she was my guardian angel, sent to guide me through the fog of grief and technology. I trusted her completely. Until the phone calls started. Calls from strangers with cold, demanding voices, talking about debts I never incurred, credit cards I never owned, purchases I never made. They used words like fraud, delinquent, collections, legal action. Words that felt like ice shards aimed directly at me. Clara Peterson, a 71-year-old woman who had never owed anyone a dime she did not intend to pay back. My granddaughter, the angel? She just cried when I asked her, big fat tears rolling down her cheeks, blaming hackers, blaming system errors, blaming anything but herself. But then came the letter. One simple, old-fashioned piece of returned mail, looking utterly insignificant in the pile of junk. And suddenly, the angel's halo cracked, shimmered, and then shattered into a million pieces right before my eyes. If you are listening to this story, thank you so much for being here. Let us know where you are joining us from in the world. And do not forget to subscribe to become part of our growing community. Life before George's passing felt simpler, safer. He was my rock for 48 years. A retired accountant, bless his meticulous soul, George handled everything financial. The mortgage payments, long since paid off, thankfully. The utility bills, the taxes, the baffling world of online banking that started creeping into our lives in his later years. I trusted him implicitly. My domain was the home, the garden, the grandchildren when they came along. I balanced my checkbook the old-fashioned way, with a pen and a ledger, and paid for groceries with cash or the one department store card I kept for emergencies. George used to tease me gently about being technologically challenged, but he never pushed. "You keep the roses blooming, Clara," he would say, "and I will keep the bill collectors away." Then one ordinary Tuesday, his heart just stopped. The silence he left behind was immense, overwhelming. Suddenly, I was adrift in a sea of paperwork I did not understand. Bills arrived via email. Bank statements popped up on the computer screen George had used, demanding passwords I did not know. The grief was a physical weight, making it hard to concentrate, hard to decipher the jargon. Paying the electricity bill felt like climbing Mount Everest. I felt foolish, incompetent, and terribly alone. My son, Mark, and his wife, Susan, were wonderful, of course. They live about an hour away, busy with their own careers and lives. They helped with the funeral arrangements, sorted through George's immediate papers, but the day-to-day running of finances felt like too much to ask of them constantly. I did not want to be a burden. That was my greatest fear, becoming a helpless old woman dependent on her children. That is where Emily came in. My lovely granddaughter. She was a sophomore in college, bright as a button, majoring in something related to computers, I think. She started visiting more often after George died, bringing me casseroles, helping me tidy up, just sitting and talking, which meant the world to me. She saw my struggles with the laptop George had left behind, saw the pile of unopened mail that seemed to grow taller each day. One afternoon, she found me nearly in tears, staring blankly at an online banking login screen. "Oh, Grandma," she said, her voice full of sympathy, putting her arm around my shoulder. "This stuff is so confusing if you are not used to it. Why do not you let me help you get organized? It is really easy once you know how." Relief washed over me. "Oh, Emily, could you? I feel so stupid. Your grandpa always handled this." "Of course," she smiled brightly. "It is no trouble at all. We can set up automatic payments for your regular bills. Link your accounts so you can see everything in one place. I can even show you how to check your balance on your phone. It will make things so much easier for you." Easier? That sounded like music to my ears. Over the next few visits, Emily became my personal tech guru. She sat beside me at George's old desk, patiently explaining things, though most of it went right over my head. She needed my social security number for verification, she said. She needed the bank account numbers, the answers to security questions George had set up years ago. "What was your first pet's name, Grandma?" She helped me choose new passwords, writing them down carefully on a notepad she kept just for Grandma's accounts. She installed banking apps on my old smartphone George had bought me and even put the same apps on her own phone. "Just so I can keep an eye on things for you, Grandma. Make sure everything is going through okay." I felt a profound sense of gratitude. She was taking such a weight off my shoulders. I bragged about her to my friends. "My Emily is just wonderful," I would say over coffee. "So smart, so helpful. I do not know what I would do without her." I trusted her implicitly. She was family. She was my light in the darkness. Why would I ever doubt her intentions? The peace lasted for a few months. Bills seemed to be paid, confirmation emails occasionally popped up. Emily had set up a new email address for me too, which she also managed. I relaxed, focusing on my grief group, my gardening, trying to find a new rhythm without George. Then the first call came. It was a Tuesday afternoon, I remember, because my favorite soap opera was just starting. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number, an 800 number. I almost did not answer, but George always said you never knew, it might be important. "Hello?" I said cautiously. A man's voice, brisk and impersonal, replied, "Am I speaking with Clara Peterson?" "Yes, speaking." "Mr. Peterson, my name is Mr. Henderson calling from Apex Collections. I am calling regarding an overdue balance on your Premier Holdings Incorporated credit card account ending in 5678. I frowned. "Premier Holdings? I do not have a credit card with that company. You must have the wrong number." Mr. Henderson sighed audibly, a sound of practiced impatience. "Ma'am, our records show this account was opened 6 months ago using your name, address, and social security number. The current outstanding balance is $3,452.14, now 90 days past due." My heart started to pound. $3,000? No, that is impossible. I never opened such an account. There must be a mistake. "Ma'am, according to our records, significant purchases were made at online electronics retailers and several high-end clothing stores. Are you saying you did not authorize these charges?" His voice held a distinct note of disbelief. "No, of course not. This is fraud." My voice trembled. "Very well, ma'am," Mr. Henderson said coolly. "We will note your dispute. However, until this is resolved, the debt remains outstanding and will continue to negatively impact your credit rating. We will be sending documentation to your address on file." He recited my correct address. He then mentioned escalating the matter if payment was not received. He rattled off a reference number and hung up, leaving me breathless and shaking. Fraud. Credit rating. $3,000. The words spun in my head. My first panicked thought was to call Emily. I dialed her number with trembling fingers. She answered on the third ring, her voice bright and cheerful. "Hi, Grandma, what's up?" Tears pricked my eyes as I relayed the conversation with Mr. Henderson. He said I owe thousands on a credit card I never even heard of, Emily. He said it was fraud, but he also said it would ruin my credit. What do I do? Emily gasped dramatically on the other end. Oh my gosh, Grandma, that is terrible. Apex Collections? Premier Holdings? Are you sure? She sounded genuinely shocked, horrified. That sounds like identity theft. Someone must have stolen your information online. Hackers are everywhere these days. It is awful. She arrived at my house within the hour, her face etched with concern. She gave me a tight hug. Poor Grandma, you must be terrified. Do not worry, she said, stroking my back. We will figure this out. It is probably just a mix-up, or like I said, some horrible hacker. Let me see if I can find anything online about this Premier Holdings company. You sit down and have some tea. I will call Apex Collections back and tell them it is a fraudulent account. We will get this straightened out. Her confidence, her immediate assumption of control, was immensely reassuring. She seemed so capable, so knowledgeable about the dangers lurking online. I clung to her explanation like a lifeline. Hackers. Yes, that must be it. Some faceless criminal out there had stolen my information. It was a terrifying thought, but somehow less terrifying than any other alternative. I watched Emily bustling around, looking things up on her phone, her brow furrowed with concentration. She made a show of calling Apex Collections back, speaking firmly into the phone about fraud reports and disputes, though I only heard her side of the conversation. She hung up with a determined look. Okay, I told them it is fraud, and you will be filing a report. They were really rude, but do not you worry, Grandma. I will help you handle everything. I sank back into my armchair, exhausted but relieved. Emily would fix it. My smart, capable granddaughter would sort out this mess caused by those awful hackers. I chose to believe her. I had to believe her. He called himself Mr. Henderson, from Apex Collections. He spoke of accounts I never opened, purchases I never made, amounts that made my head spin. Emily swore it was a mistake, a glitch in the system, a hacker's cruel works. I wanted so badly to believe her, needed it to be true with every fiber of my being. But that was only the first call. The storm, I would soon learn, was just beginning to gather, and the real culprit was sitting right beside me, offering comfort and lies. Believing Emily's hacker theory was like holding onto a leaky lifeboat in a storm. It offered temporary comfort, but the cold waves of reality kept crashing over me. Mr. Henderson from Apex Collections was not the last caller. Soon, others followed. Different companies, Summit Receivables, Nationwide Debt Solutions. Different voices, but the same chilling message. More phantom credit cards, store accounts I had never heard of. How could I possibly have an account at Gamerzone Electronics? Installment plans for furniture apparently delivered somewhere I had never lived. The amounts grew larger, more terrifying. $5,000 here, $2,000 there. Each call left me shaking, my breath short, my stomach churning with anxiety. Sleep became a luxury. I would lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, the faceless voices of the debt collectors echoing in the dark. During the day, I jumped every time the phone rang, my heart leaping into my throat. I started letting calls go to voicemail, screening them, only picking up if I recognized the number. The cheerful chime announcing a new email, once a welcome sound, now filled me with dread. Was it another bill notification Emily had set up? Another late payment warning? I tried talking to Emily again, my voice trembling despite my efforts to sound calm. Emily, dear, another company called today. Nationwide Debt Solutions. They mentioned an account for furniture? Emily sighed dramatically, running a hand through her hair. Oh, Grandma, not again. These people are relentless. Did you give them any information? You shouldn't talk to them, remember? It just encourages them. I told you I'm handling it. I've filed dispute forms online, but these things take time. These hackers, they probably opened accounts everywhere. She sounded exasperated, as if I were the one causing the problem by being upset. When I tried to press for more details, did you find out anything about that Premier Holdings card? Did Apex call back? She became defensive, sometimes even tearful. Grandma, why don't you trust me? I'm doing my best. It's really stressful dealing with all these companies, and it feels like you're blaming me. Blaming her. The thought had barely crossed my mind, or perhaps I had pushed it away the moment it flickered. Blaming Emily felt like blaming sunshine for being warm. But her reaction, the way she turned my worry into an accusation against her, planted a tiny, uncomfortable seed of doubt. My attempts to confide in Mark and Susan were even less successful. I called Mark one evening, my voice thick with unshed tears, after a particularly nasty call threatening legal action. Mark, I'm so worried. These calls won't stop. They're talking about thousands of dollars, ruining my credit. Mark sighed heavily on the other end. I could picture him rubbing his temples. Mom, we talked about this. Emily is helping you. She said it's likely identity theft, and she's disputing everything. You need to be patient. Getting upset isn't helping. Honestly, you're stressing Emily out too. Susan got on the extension. Clara, dear, she said, her voice falsely sweet. Maybe you're focusing on this too much. It's probably just some computer error. Emily is very capable. Why don't you try to relax? Getting worked up isn't good for your blood pressure. Their dismissal felt like a slap in the face. It was not just a computer error. It was my name, my reputation, my financial security being threatened. They talked down to me, treating me like a confused old woman imagining things. They blindly trusted Emily, their perfect daughter, and implicitly distrusted me, their own mother. The isolation pressed in, cold and suffocating. Was I going crazy? Was I really just being paranoid? In an effort to regain some sense of control, I decided to do something simple. Review the statement for my own checking account, the one George and I had used for years, the one my pension went into. Emily had set it up for online viewing, but the bank still sent paper statements, thank goodness. I spread the latest one out on the kitchen table, armed with a magnifying glass and a pen, determined to understand at least this part of my financial life. Most of the transactions were familiar. The automatic withdrawal for the utility bill Emily had set up, the grocery store debits, my pharmacy charges. But then, nestled among the familiar names, were a few I did not recognize. Small charges, $20 here, $35 there, from websites called Trendy Threads Boutique and Pixel Palace Games. Another $50 charge simply said, online gift card purchase. It wasn't thousands, but it was money I knew I had not spent. Trendy Threads? I bought my clothes at Miller's department store. Pixel Palace Games. The last game I played was bridge, decades ago. A different kind of unease settled over me. This was not a phantom credit card opened by hackers. This was my own debit card linked directly to my checking account. How? The next time Emily visited, bringing me a pot of daisies, I took a deep breath and broached the subject as gently as I could. Emily, dear, I began, spreading the statement on the table. I was looking over my bank statement, and I noticed a few small charges I don't quite recognize. This Trendy Threads, for example. Emily glanced at the statement, her cheerful expression faltering for just a second before she quickly composed herself. Oh, that? Let me see. She peered at it, feigning confusion. Trendy Threads? No, doesn't ring a bell, Grandma. Are you sure you didn't order something small online? Maybe a gift for someone? No, dear, I'm quite sure, I insisted gently. And this Pixel Palace Games? Emily's face suddenly crumpled. Tears welled up in her eyes, startling me. Oh, Grandma, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Okay, I have to confess something. She sank into a chair, covering her face with her hands. It was me. I borrowed your debit card number, just for those few little things. I stared at her, stunned. You borrowed it? Without asking? I know it was wrong, she sobbed, tears streaming freely now. My own card wasn't working. There was some issue, and I really needed that top from Trendy Threads for a party. And my friend Lisa's birthday was coming up, so I got her that online gift card. I was going to tell you. I was going to pay you back right away, I swear. I felt so embarrassed. Please don't be mad, Grandma. And please don't tell Mom and Dad. They'll kill me. She looked so genuinely distraught, so ashamed. And the amounts were small, relatively speaking. Almost immediately, she pulled out her phone and transferred the exact total of those questionable charges back into my checking account via the banking app. See, Grandma? Paid back in full. I am so sorry. It was stupid and impulsive. It won't ever happen again, I promise. My initial shock and disappointment softened, replaced by a familiar wave of affection and pity. She was just a kid, really. Kids made mistakes. Maybe she was under pressure financially with college costs. The fact that she confessed immediately when confronted and paid it back, it seemed genuine. And her plea not to tell Mark and Susan resonated. I didn't want to cause more family drama or get her into serious trouble over what now seemed like a minor transgression. All right, Emily, I said slowly, patting her hand. We all make mistakes. As long as you understand it was wrong not to ask first, and it doesn't happen again. I folded the bank statement, wanting to put the unpleasantness behind us. I chose to believe her explanation, chose to see it as a separate issue, a small lapse in judgment unrelated to the larger, scarier problem of the collection calls. I wanted desperately for it to be true. But looking back, was that small emergency purchase the only secret hidden behind those innocent tears? Was her quick repayment simply a calculated move to regain my trust, using money she'd likely already siphoned from another hidden account? The debt collection calls, of course, did not stop. If anything, they became more frequent, more aggressive. Letters started arriving too. Red-stamped final notice letters threatening wage garnishment from my pension and legal action. Emily continued her performance of trying to handle it, reporting back vague updates about dispute processes and fraud investigations taking time. But nothing ever seemed to improve. My anxiety grew into a constant low-grade panic. The breaking point came unexpectedly. My old refrigerator, bless its humming heart, finally gave out. After getting a repair estimate that was almost as much as a new one, I decided it was time. I went down to Miller's department store, the place I had bought appliances with George for years. I picked out a modest, reliable model. When it came time to arrange financing, they were offering 0% interest for 12 months, which seemed sensible. The sales clerk ran my application. He came back a few minutes later, looking uncomfortable. Mrs. Peterson, he stammered, avoiding my eye. There seems to be an issue with the credit application. An issue? I asked, confused. My husband and I had cards here for years. Yes, ma'am. I see your long history, he said apologetically. But the central credit check, it was declined. The report indicates, well, frankly, ma'am, it indicates a very poor credit score due to multiple delinquent accounts and high outstanding balances with other creditors. Declined? Poor credit score? Me? Clara Peterson? The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I felt a hot flush of shame creep up my neck right there in the middle of the appliance department. I mumbled an excuse and practically fled the store. leaving the chosen refrigerator behind. That night, I did something I had never done before. Remembering an advertisement I had seen on television, I went online to one of those free credit report websites Emily had bookmarked on my computer. My hands shook as I typed in my information, answering security questions that felt eerily familiar, questions Emily had asked me months ago. The screen loaded, and then there it was. My name, my address, and a credit score so low it looked like a typo. Below it, a list scrolled down the page, longer than I could have imagined. Premier Holdings, Inc., Summit Receivables, Nationwide Debt Solutions. Accounts I did not recognize, loans I never applied for, credit limits maxed out. Payment statuses flagged in bright red, 120 days past due. Charge-off collection. The sheer scale of it hit me like a physical blow. This was not a hacker grabbing one card number. This was not a system error. This was a systematic, deliberate destruction of my financial identity. The small transactions on my debit card, Emily's tearful confession, they felt like a smokescreen, a diversion from this catastrophic reality. The denial I had clung to shattered completely. The vague reassurances from Emily, the dismissals from Mark and Susan, they evaporated in the harsh glare of the credit report on the screen. Panic gave way to a cold, terrifying certainty. Someone had done this to me. Someone with access to all my personal information, my social security number, my bank details, my passwords, my mother's maiden name. Someone I had trusted implicitly. Tears streamed down my face, hot and angry now, not just sad. I would not be declined for a refrigerator in my own hometown. I would not live in fear of the phone ringing. I would not be dismissed as a confused old woman. I did not know how, but I had to find out exactly what had happened. I could not rely on Emily. I could not rely on Mark or Susan. This was my name, my life, and I had to fight for it myself. My first step, I decided, gripping the edge of the desk until my knuckles turned white, would be to walk into my bank tomorrow morning and demand answers. I needed to see the paper trail. I needed proof. Seeing that disastrous credit report felt like staring into an abyss. The numbers, the unfamiliar company names, the stark red warnings, they swam before my tear-filled eyes. My immediate instinct was to call Mark again, to wave this undeniable proof in front of him and Susan, to force them to see the truth. But the memory of their previous dismissals, their sighs of impatience, held me back. What would they say this time? That the website was wrong? That I somehow misinterpreted the numbers? Or worse, would they find a way to blame me, suggesting I'd been careless online, clicked on a bad link, invited the hackers in myself? The thought of facing their skepticism again, their unwavering defense of Emily, felt utterly exhausting, profoundly lonely. I tried calling one of the credit bureaus listed on the report, navigating a frustrating automated phone tree that demanded account numbers I didn't have and security codes I didn't know. After 20 minutes of being transferred and put on hold, listening to tinny music that grated on my nerves, I slammed the receiver down in frustration. Trying to untangle this mess felt like trying to knit with spaghetti. I felt trapped, overwhelmed, and terrifyingly alone. For a few days, I drifted in a fog of anxiety, the devastating knowledge of my ruined credit festering inside me, unsure of my next move. Then came the mail. It was a Thursday, I think. The usual pile lay on the mat inside the front door: junk mail flyers, a catalog, a bill I recognized. I almost tossed one envelope into the recycling bin along with the flyers. It was a standard white business envelope, addressed to me, Clara Peterson, at my correct address. But slapped across the front in bold red ink was a stamp. Return to sender, address unknown. Below that, barely legible, was the return address for Premier Holdings, Inc., the very first phantom credit card company Mr. Henderson had mentioned. Why would a letter addressed correctly to me be marked address unknown and returned? Curiosity, tinged with a familiar dread, made me pause. My fingers fumbled slightly as I tore open the envelope. Inside wasn't a bill or a demand for payment. It looked like a welcome letter, or perhaps a notification. Dear valued Premier Holdings card member, it began cheerfully. It went on to mention something about enhanced security features or a recent transaction query. But what made my blood run cold were the details listed below my name. There was a reference to a recent high-value purchase, a new laptop computer, shipped not to my address, but to Apt 4B, 125 Willow Creek Drive. And listed as the primary contact phone number was a cell number I didn't recognize. Willow Creek Drive, apartment 4B, the address snagged on a thread of memory. Hadn't Emily mentioned that her new boyfriend David lived in those new Willow Creek apartments? She'd described the building, just across town, and the phone number. Emily had casually mentioned needing a new phone a few weeks back, complaining her old one was dying. Had she gotten a new number and just forgotten to tell me? I sank onto the hallway chair, the letter trembling in my hand. This wasn't a hacker in some faraway country. Hackers don't typically ship expensive laptops to addresses easily traceable to the victim's granddaughter's boyfriend. Hackers don't usually provide their contact numbers on fraudulent accounts. Premier Holdings had likely tried to send something, maybe the card itself, maybe a fraud alert notice, to the Willow Creek address Emily had provided when setting up the account. But perhaps she'd gotten the apartment number slightly wrong, or the mail carrier there didn't recognize my name, leading to the address unknown stamp. Then, following protocol, the company had likely sent a follow-up notification or the returned item confirmation to the primary address on file, my address. A simple, bureaucratic slip-up in Emily's carefully constructed digital deception. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The small debit card borrowing. The tearful confessions that now felt utterly staged. The constant deflections. The way she managed my email, my online accounts, likely deleting incriminating notifications before I ever saw them. The calls I received were only the ones that slipped through her net, the debts so overdue they'd gone to third-party collectors who used phone numbers she couldn't block or predict. This returned letter, this tangible piece of paper created by the very system she tried to manipulate, was the smoking gun. It was just one letter, official-looking paper, slightly crumpled from its journey, marked Return to Sender. But the details inside. A shipping address in that new apartment complex Emily mentioned her boyfriend lived in, a phone number I didn't recognize. Why would my credit card information be linked to those places, used to buy things she would want? A cold dread, different from the fear of debt collectors, began to creep into my heart, settling deep in my bones. It wasn't just possible anymore. It felt sickeningly certain. My sweet Emily, my light, had systematically stolen my identity and buried me in debt. This time, I didn't hesitate. The hurt was sharp, visceral, but it was overshadowed by a burning need for confrontation, for the lies to stop. I called Mark and Susan immediately. "You need to come over," I said, my voice flat, devoid of the pleading tremor it usually held when discussing this topic. "Both of you. And bring Emily. Now." Maybe it was the tone in my voice, but for once, they didn't argue. They arrived less than an hour later, Emily trailing behind her parents, her face sullen. I had them sit in the living room, the scene of so many of Emily's tearful performances. I remained standing, the returned letter clutched in my hand like shield and sword. I received an interesting piece of mail today, I began, my voice shaking slightly despite my resolve. I held up the letter. It's from Premier Holdings. It was returned to me because the address they tried sending it to first was apparently unknown. I unfolded the letter carefully. Funny thing is, the address they tried sending it to was Apartment 4B, 125 Willow Creek Drive. Isn't that where your boyfriend David lives, Emily? Emily's face went deathly pale. She stared at the letter as if it were a snake. I don't know what you're talking about, Grandma, she stammered. That's crazy. Why would your mail go there? Maybe, I continued, my voice gaining strength, because whoever opened this credit card in my name, using my social security number, listed that as the shipping address for the brand new laptop they purchased. And maybe they also listed this phone number as the contact. I read out the unfamiliar number. Is that your new number, Emily? The one you forgot to give your worried old grandmother? Emily burst into tears. But these were not the soft, pleading tears of before. These were loud, angry sobs. This is insane, she shrieked, jumping up from the couch. You're accusing me? How could you? You probably went through my stuff. You're snooping. That letter isn't even yours. It says return to sender. You shouldn't have opened it. It's addressed to Clara Peterson, I shot back, anger finally boiling over. That's me. And my name is on the thousands of dollars of debt you've racked up. Mom, stop it! Mark stood up, his face flushed with anger, directed entirely at me. You're upsetting Emily. Can't you see how ridiculous this sounds? You found a misaddressed letter, and you're building this crazy conspiracy theory around it. You're paranoid. Paranoid? I cried, incredulous. Mark, look at this. Look at the address. Look at the phone number. Look at the credit report I printed out last night, showing dozens of accounts I never opened. I waved the papers I'd retrieved from beside my chair. Susan stepped forward, putting a protective arm around the sobbing Emily. Clara, honestly, I think you're confused, she said, her voice dripping with condescending pity. Maybe you're not remembering things clearly, all this stress. Perhaps you should see Dr. Evans, just to talk? Suggesting I needed a doctor. Accusing me of being confused, paranoid, senile. Blaming me for opening my own mail. Siding completely, utterly, with the girl who was now hiding behind her mother, her face buried in Susan's shoulder, peeking out occasionally with eyes that held not sadness, but fury and resentment. It was the final, crushing blow. My own son, my own daughter-in-law, believed I was losing my mind rather than entertain the possibility that their precious Emily was capable of such deceit. The fight drained out of me, replaced by a chilling emptiness. I felt utterly alone, adrift, misunderstood, and deeply, deeply ashamed. Though ashamed of what? I wasn't even sure anymore. Maybe they were right. Maybe the grief and the stress had broken something inside me. The room started to spin. I sank back into my armchair, the letter and the credit report falling from my numb fingers onto the carpet. They left soon after, Mark muttering something about needing to get Emily away from this negativity. Susan casting a final look back at me that mingled pity with disapproval. The front door closed, leaving me in a silence that felt heavier and more profound than ever before. This was my dark night of the soul, abandoned, accused, doubting my own sanity. I don't know how long I sat there, staring blankly at the floral pattern on the rug. Hours, maybe. The tears eventually dried, leaving my face stiff and salty. But as the numbness receded, something else began to stir within me, deep down. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was anger. A cold, quiet, simmering rage. Anger at Emily for her betrayal. Anger at Mark and Susan for their willful blindness. But mostly, anger at myself for doubting my own mind, for letting them make me feel small and crazy. I bent down and picked up the returned letter, smoothing the creases. The ink was stark against the white paper. Willow Creek Drive. The unfamiliar phone number. The laptop purchase. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't confusion. It was evidence. Tangible proof sitting right here in my hand. George wouldn't have stood for this. He would have been methodical, collected the facts, faced the truth head on. And he would have expected me to do the same. I wouldn't let them break me. I wouldn't let Emily get away with this. I wouldn't live under the shadow of debt and suspicion for the rest of my days. If my own family wouldn't help me find the truth, then I would find it myself. I stood up, my legs shaky, but my resolve firming with every passing second. They called me paranoid. They called me confused. Maybe they were right about the confused part. Confused about how I could have trusted so blindly. But holding that returned letter, feeling the paper between my fingers, I knew it was not confusion I felt now. It was betrayal. And I would not rest until I knew the whole truth, no matter how ugly it turned out to be. Tomorrow, first thing, I was going to the bank, not to ask questions, but to demand answers. And I would bring my proof. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I had not felt in months. The fear and confusion were still there, lurking at the edges, but they were overshadowed by a steely resolve. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple navy blue dress and low heels, the kind of outfit George always said made me look respectable and no nonsense. I gathered my evidence. The disastrous credit report I had printed, the stack of collection letters, and most importantly, the crumpled but crucial returned letter from Premier Holdings, Inc. I put them neatly into a large handbag, skipped breakfast entirely, my stomach was in knots, and walked the 4 blocks to the downtown branch of my bank, the bank George and I had used since we were first married. Walking through the heavy glass doors felt like crossing a threshold. I bypassed the teller line and asked firmly to speak with the branch manager or someone in the fraud department. The young woman at the reception desk looked surprised. I suppose I didn't look like the type to demand things, but she made a call, and soon a kind-faced woman named Mrs. Davis introduced herself as an assistant manager specializing in customer accounts and fraud claims. She led me to a small private office. I sat down, placed my handbag firmly on my lap, and took a deep breath. "Mrs. Davis," I began, my voice trembling only slightly. "I believe my identity has been stolen, and I need the bank's help to prove it." I laid out my story, starting with George's passing and my initial reliance on my granddaughter Emily for help with online banking. I described the first calls from debt collectors, Emily's explanations about hackers, my family's dismissal of my concerns. I showed her the credit report, the collection letters. Mrs. Davis listened patiently, her expression growing more serious with each detail. Finally, I produced the returned letter. "This arrived yesterday," I explained, pointing out the shipping address and the unfamiliar phone number. "My granddaughter's boyfriend lives at that address. I believe my granddaughter has been opening accounts and making purchases using my information." Mrs. Davis examined the letter carefully. She typed rapidly into her computer, her brow furrowed. "Mrs. Peterson," she said after a few minutes, her voice gentle but firm, "based on what you are telling me, and this letter, we absolutely need to investigate further. Let me access your profile." For the next hour, Mrs. Davis worked diligently. She pulled up records of accounts linked to my Social Security number, not just the checking account I knew, but multiple credit cards issued by this bank and its partners, accounts I had never seen before. She cross-referenced application dates and activation times. Then she did something called an IP address lookup. When these accounts were accessed online, or when applications were submitted, she explained, the system often logs the internet address from where the activity originated. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. A moment later, she turned the screen slightly towards me, though the technical jargon meant little. "Mrs. Peterson," she said gravely, "several of these credit card applications and numerous recent logins to view account details originated from IP addresses registered to the university campus where your granddaughter attends classes. Others trace back to a residential internet service provider at this address." She typed in Mark and Susan's home address, and quite a few recent online purchases using these cards were made from the public Wi-Fi network at a coffee shop just 2 blocks from the Willow Creek apartment complex you mentioned. There it was. Cold, hard, digital proof. It wasn't hackers in Russia. It wasn't a system glitch. It was Emily, using the university computers, her parents' home internet, even coffee shop Wi-Fi near her boyfriend's apartment, to systematically defraud me. Mrs. Davis printed out pages and pages of evidence, account summaries, transaction lists filled with unfamiliar stores and large sums, the IP address logs. The sheer volume of it was staggering. Designer clothes, electronics, restaurant meals, cash advances. It was a portrait of a lifestyle far beyond a college student's means, all funded by my stolen identity. Mrs. Davis explained the next steps: filing official fraud affidavits with the bank, filing a police report, a necessary step, she emphasized, for disputing the debts with the credit bureaus and other lenders, contacting each creditor individually. It sounded overwhelming, but for the first time, I felt like I had an ally, a path forward. That evening, I called Mark, Susan, and Emily again. My voice was calm, firm. "I need you to come over immediately. I have been to the bank. There are things you need to see." They arrived looking wary, Emily hiding slightly behind Mark. I did not invite them to sit. I simply stood in my living room and laid the stack of papers from the bank on the coffee table. The fraud affidavits, the transaction histories highlighting purchases for items Emily owned or places she frequented, the damning list of IP addresses. "I went to the bank today," I said quietly. "They were very helpful. They confirmed multiple fraudulent accounts opened in my name. They traced the online activity used to open and manage these accounts." I tapped the IP address log. "To the university library, to your home address, Mark and Susan, to the coffee shop near David's apartment." I looked directly at Emily, whose face had crumpled. The defiant anger was gone, replaced by sheer panic. "They printed out the transaction history too, Emily. The laptop shipped to David's apartment. The clothes from Trendy Threads, more than just the one item you borrowed my debit card for. The concert tickets, the meals at expensive restaurants, thousands and thousands of dollars." Silence descended. Mark stared at the papers, his face paling. Susan looked back and forth between the evidence and Emily, disbelief warring with dawning horror. Emily finally broke, collapsing onto the sofa in genuine, racking sobs. I didn't mean for it to get so bad," she choked out between gasps. "It started small, just needing a little extra cash. David had debts. I wanted to help him. Then I wanted things for myself. Everyone else seemed to have so much. I thought I could pay it back before you noticed. But it just spiraled." The confession tumbled out, a pathetic story of entitlement, peer pressure, and spiraling lies. Mark sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Susan stood frozen, tears silently tracking down her cheeks. There were no more accusations of paranoia, no more suggestions I see a doctor. The truth, stark and ugly, was laid bare on the coffee table between us. The weeks and months that followed were the hardest of my life in a different way. The confrontation didn't magically heal anything, it simply exposed the wound. I followed through, methodically. I filed the police report, a painful but necessary step. The officer was kind, explaining it was crucial for clearing my name with the credit bureaus, even if I chose not to press for criminal charges against Emily personally, a decision I ultimately made, unable to bear the thought of my own granddaughter facing jail time, though the bank and credit card companies might pursue their own actions. I filled out endless fraud affidavits, made countless phone calls, sent certified letters. Mrs. Davis at the bank was a gizeniend, guiding me through the process. Slowly, painstakingly, the fraudulent accounts began to be removed from my credit report. It was an exhausting, emotionally draining battle, revisiting the betrayal with every form I filled out. My relationship with Mark and Susan remains fractured. They apologize profusely, consumed by guilt over not believing me, over enabling Emily's behavior for so long. But the trust is broken, perhaps irrevocably. We speak occasionally, strained conversations mostly about superficial things. Emily, I see her even less. She is apparently working 2 jobs now, trying to make restitution arrangements with the creditors, attending counseling. Perhaps one day she will truly understand the depth of the hurt she caused, not just financially, but emotionally. For now, strict boundaries are in place. No more shared information, no more casual visits, no more unquestioning trust. But amidst the wreckage, something unexpected happened. Facing my fears head-on, navigating the complex bureaucracy of fraud claims forced me to learn. I realized I couldn't go back to being financially dependent or ignorant. I enrolled in a basic computer skills class for seniors at the community center. Then I took another class on personal finance management. I learned how to navigate online banking safely, how to set up strong passwords, how to check my own credit report regularly, how to spot phishing scams. It wasn't easy. My fingers still felt clumsy on the keyboard sometimes, but with each small victory, paying a bill myself online, understanding a bank statement, recognizing a suspicious email, my confidence grew. It is a year later now. My credit score is slowly recovering. More importantly, I am recovering. I sit here in my own cozy living room, the late afternoon sun slanting through the window. On the table next to me sits my new tablet, a modest one I bought myself after careful research. I just finished paying my utility bills online and checking my bank balance. It feels empowering. I still miss George terribly, but I no longer feel completely adrift without him. I've learned to navigate some of these waters myself. The ordeal taught me a painful lesson about trust, that love, even the deepest family love, cannot excuse deceit or justify willful blindness. But it also taught me about resilience, about finding strength I never knew I possessed, about the importance of trusting my own instincts, my own mind, even when the people closest to me doubted me. Betrayal leaves scars, deep ones. But it doesn't have to define you. Sometimes, the hardest challenges force us to grow in ways we never imagined. Sometimes, you have to walk through the fire to realize you are stronger than you ever thought possible. Trusting others is a precious gift, I think now. But learning to trust yourself, that is priceless. Thank you for listening to my story, for sharing this painful but ultimately empowering chapter of my life. If you or someone you know has faced betrayal or financial hardship, please remember you are not alone. Like this video if it touched you, share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe for more stories of resilience and finding strength in unexpected places. We truly appreciate your support. See you next time.